What makes you happy is the question that I will answer by the end of this show. Hello and welcome to another episode of The More You Know Mondays. The more you know, the more you grow. And this week on the show, I will be talking about the Vatican and cats. But before I get into that, you know what I have to do? I have to start the show off with something positive, some positive vibes, and I do that every week in the form of Monday affirmations. Now, if you're new here, thank you for coming and joining us. But if you are a returning listener, thank you for coming back. What we do here every week is I share some interesting random facts from history about interesting people or just interesting events and delve more into the facts. So this week's quote is by Rainer Biddy, and it goes like this. Dear self, stop reopening your doors for toxic people, then calling it seeking closure. Certain things don't work out in life, and that's okay. And I actually really like this quote, only in the sense that you're talking to yourself, and a lot of people think that when you talk to yourself is kind of crazy, but talking to yourself is kind of the best way to process any information. And that's not just my opinion, it's scientifically proven. Check it out. Do some research. I did some. And I saw it in some random article I was checking out. But when you talk to yourself, when you tell yourself, affirm things for yourself, it helps yourself to process it. Because as much as you can talk to other people and conversate and talk out these problems, the root of the problem, not the root of the problem, the root of the cause of what's making the problem happen is you, if there is a problem. So instead of speaking to other people, you need to deal with you. And I feel that a lot of times, probably more in relationships, but it can also happen in friendships as well. There's a moment where you feel as though you need some sort of reason from another person for the reason why they're no longer speaking to you, or the reason why they no longer want to, I guess, see you, or whatever the situation is. It feels as though, as people, or as humans maybe, we need, what can you call it? Like assurance that maybe, not that we didn't do anything wrong, but maybe that it wasn't our fault. So this idea of that I am actually going to probably newly adopt of having breaking up with a toxic person, whether that be a romantic relationship or a platonic one, and then feeling as though you need some sort of closure. So you invite that toxic energy back into your life so that you can draw a line over it. But the drawing the line was when you first got that person out of your life. Why invite that energy back in just to kick it back out again? You might as well, you already cut the snake's head off, so just let it wither and die instead of trying to sew the head back on again. and hoping it will still slither. Maybe that metaphor doesn't work. I don't know how snakes work. I'm pretty sure they regrow things. I don't know. I don't know about snakes, but I know about this because it's something that I've done myself. I've got to the end of something and it hasn't maybe worked out in the way that I thought it was going to work out, or things haven't been resolved fully for me, and I feel as though I need some sort of level of closure, when in reality, the door's already closed. I got my closure when that person left and shut the door after them. So why again would I let them ring the doorbell and then welcomely invite them in, just so that at the end of this conversation, or whatever we do to try and resolve it, and we get closure, whatever that is, then I kick it back out and shut the door. But then I'm thinking, then it kind of brings, although at this point you've kicked it out of the door, you've had time to think about it, and then you've met again, and then you've had more time to think about it. But I don't know. There's obviously good and bad outcomes to every scenario. And obviously it's a risk that anyone has to take when embarking on a journey of trying to get closure for their situations, which everyone is of course welcome to do. But I just think it's interesting. It's an interesting perspective to look at it, in the sense of, if you just let one door close and then process it as that being your closure, are you okay to continue knowing that that door closing was the end? Or do you still need an extra addition for you to confirm the closure in your head? It's something to think about anyway. But I think it's interesting, motivational, inspiring thoughts to be thinking. A thought process to be on. Just in the security of kind of protecting yourself, because by you getting closure, you're like the quote suggests or says, you're bringing that toxic energy back into your life. So why do that when you could avoid it altogether and just keep it moving as you have been, without actually needing to get the extra level of closure? But I mean, I'm sure I will fall into the same level to need this level of closure again, but I will try and think about this quote when I get to this point, or if I get to this point again. But I think it's something interesting to think about. So my sum up of this Monday's affirmation was done just right then. I don't usually do that. I usually say that, oh yeah, I'm going to do a sum up. But I guess I just summed it up just then. So if you weren't listening, rewind maybe 2 minutes and then just press play, and I hope that I'm not midway through speaking, but I'm sure I won't be. I'm sure you can get it right to the right point. But anyway, let's get on with the show. So as I said at the start of the show, this episode will be on the Vatican and cats. And I had some really interesting research when I stumbled upon this, fact. And I mean, it did kind of puzzle me. I was just like, a pope ordered cats to be killed? I mean, let me look into this a little bit deeper before I start sharing with people about how there's something like a vicious battle going on between the Vatican and cats. But I mean, on the surface, it seems like it's like one of those things that I think, if you don't really think about it too much, it seems pretty plausible. But let me really get into the story. So, before I get into the story, I think it would be interesting to just delve into the idea of, not even to the idea, but just the thought process of cats. And the story, before I actually get into this, is that Pope Gregory IX, supposedly banned cats and ordered them to be killed. And then this, I guess this idea or this superstition or this myth then kind of spitballs into another idea that because of this order for cats to be banned or cats to be killed, it meant that this was the reason for the rise in the bubonic plague. But we'll come into that in a second. So like I said, let's start with just cats. Throughout history, cats have kind of been revered as, I mean, in my opinion, kind of something that's been more godlike than anything satanic. So if you think about back in the times of the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, cats were like pretty much adorned. They were seen as gods in the eyes of the ancient Egyptians and pretty much worshipped. And if you think about it, not even if you think about it, historically, cats were actually brought to Europe or brought across to Europe from Egypt by the Romans. So the Romans brought the cats over and across into Europe, and they were pretty much worshipped when they first were brought over to Europe by the Romans, rather. And when they were brought over, they weren't too much of a problem because cats have this wonderful natural reflex where they are like the perfect natural solution for pests. And because of that, during the time in the Roman era of the agricultural boom, this cats being brought over from Egypt was perfect because cats literally eat anything that isn't meat. So that meant that the farmers knew that their crops were safe because they knew that the cats weren't going to be eating the crops, and they knew that the pests level would be down because the mice would be chasing and catching all of the vermin. So it was a win-win for the Romans. But I think it was more of what happened around the early 13th century. So we're talking the year 1230, like in the 1230s. So back then, when Pope Gregory IX issued his papal bull, which was called Vox in Roma, which translates into a voice in Roma. And basically the story goes that Pope Gregory IX, he issued a papal bull which stated that cats were an instrument of Satan. And that set medieval Europe on a great cat purge, with special attention paid rather, to black cats who were particularly, oh damn, I can't say this word, particularly, I think that's it, particularly, in cahoots with the devil. So, cats went from being the worship of the pagans to being the target of contempt by the Catholics and perceived to have similarities with the devil. Now, this is all good and well, but kind of let's really think about this logically. Though at the same time, I wasn't alive back in the medieval times in Europe, and all we know about those times are what historians can tell us about the possibilities of what might have happened back then. But it's not an exact science, and we don't know because we didn't live it. But I think with a lot of things, when you encroach a little bit of logic to it and also add a level of science, you come to a kind of a different understanding of what actually might have happened. And I'm going to go into a few of those, I guess, inquiries through the course of this episode. But first of all, let's just think about cats in general. I mean, I'm not saying that there's anything evil about cats, but I mean, you can't really make a cat do anything that you want it to do, not unless the cat believes that there's something, like, for example, one of my friends has an issue where a cat from, not the neighborhood, one of their neighbors has a cat, and sometimes when they have the door open in the kitchen, the cat would come inside. Now, they find it hard to get the cat back outside again once the cat has come inside. So the only way they've figured out of how to get the cat out is by tricking the cat, in the sense of they'll make a cup of milk and kind of leave it outside, which would lure the cat outside to get the milk, and then they'll shut the door, so then the cat would remain outside. And it's not cruel because it's not their cat, but the fact that they had to set the standard to be, not set the standard, the stakes had to be greater. I think that's better. The stakes had to be greater than the cat being inside the house for the cat to leave the house. And that's the only way you could make that cat do anything, was if you give it treats to get it out. So I'm not saying that they're evil. I'm not saying that they're in league with the devil. I'm just saying there's like kind of plausible connections between why people might think through the myth or through this, I guess, conspiracy theory. Not that I want to call it a conspiracy theory, but through this, I guess, yeah, let's call it a myth or something that's gone through time, that's kind of like Chinese whispers, in a sense that it's been told to a lot of people and it's been passed down, and I'm sure the story has kind of changed over time, but it's plausible, and it's something that we should add to our inquiry. The next would be what Pope Gregory IX actually said. So basically, this was all connected to some sort of, I guess, a bizarre rite that Gregory IX had claimed about a Luciferian sect, which is basically a cult, which were engaging in rituals in which they had statues of black cats, and he had something, or someone had maybe told him, or he had believed that these statues of the black cats would come to life, and the members of this cult would kiss the asses of the cats. But anyway, the rite goes as follows. The following rites of this pestilence are carried out when any novice is to be received among them and enters the sect of the damned for the first time. The shape of a certain frog appears to him, which some are accustomed to call a toad. Some kiss this creature on the hind quarters and some on the mouth. They receive the tongue and the saliva of the beast inside their mouths. Sometimes it appears underly large, sometimes equivalent to a goose or a duck, and sometimes it even assumes the size of an oven. At length, when the novice has come forward, he is met by a man of marvelous pallor, who has very black eyes and is so emaciated and thin that, since his flesh has been wasted, seems to have remained only skin drawn over the bone. The novice kisses him and feels cold like ice, and after the kiss, the memory of the Catholic faith totally disappears from his heart. Afterwards, they sit down to a meal, and when they have arisen from it, a certain statue, which is usually a sect of this kind, a black cat about the size of an average dog, descends backwards with its tail erect. The first novice, then the master, then each one of the order who are worthy and perfect kiss the cat on its hind quarters. The imperfect who do not estimate themselves worthy receive grace from the master. Then each returns to his place, and speaking certain response, they incline their heads towards the cat. "Forgive us," says the master, and the next to him repeats this, and a third responds saying, "We know, master." A fourth says, "And we must obey." The Pope then goes on immediately after this passage, and he starts, describing the details of what the cult would, engage in, which he said they would be engaging in wild sex orgies in the dark, which would usually involve incest, gay sex, and the appearance of a mystery man with glowing genitals and hairy legs, which I assume is the beast, which is the devil. But it's quite a bizarre rite for Pope Gregory IX to say. But he did say it. I found it through my research. I will actually start doing this more often, but I'll drop the sources where I get my information from in the show notes of every episode from this episode forward. I will try and actually go back over my research on other episodes and see if I can find it and add it on my sources, so you can see that I've actually taken this information from credible sources, and it's not just stuff that I've made up. I've researched this. But this is what it says. And I just think that in that rite, he kind of, although it's quite bizarre in what he says about what he's talking, but it's very interestingly written. He doesn't actually say anywhere in the rite specifically anything about killing cats or outlawing outlawing cats. I mean, he mentions, or he he mentions that about black cats and how they are kind of seen as the idol of this satanic cult, but there's nowhere where he specifically says that people should go out there and kill cats. But I know, people being people, and the thing with, I guess, the written word or any words or anything that's being said is, depending on who you are or how you are as a person or what mood you're in, you may take the information or look at it in a different light. So people might have seen this rite or heard this rite and thought, okay, so maybe the Pope's saying that we should get rid of our cats, like cats are evil. So that could have caused the myth to come in fruition and make that connection between what Pope Gregory IX said and the cats being killed in some sort of correlation between the two. But I think the part where it kind of doesn't really connect with really science, in saying that, I think it's kind of, not that it doesn't connect with science, well, I will kind of get onto that part, but it's more of kind of a little bit of a stretch to say that there's a connection between Pope Gregory having this rite, and then with this rite, directly people then went and started killing cats. And then after this, because of the death of all these cats, there was the bubonic plague, which probably killed around 25 million people from my Google search, but who knows how much we can trust Google. I'm kidding. I use Google all the time. But it said that from history.com is where they've grabbed their information from, so I do trust that. They say that the plague killed around 25 to 50 million people, which is a lot of people. And kind of at the same time, you kind of think about the connections with us being in this pandemic and how many people this virus has killed. But that aside, the connection that we should be thinking about next would be the fact of Pope Gregory IX issued his papal bull between 1232 and 1234. And then the Black Death came to Europe in 1347. So that would mean that in about 100 years, so a whole complete generation, or not generation, maybe a century. 100 years is a century, right? Yep. I believe that's my final answer. 100 years is definitely a century. So, about 100 years after Pope Gregory made this rite about the satanic cult, then immediately afterwards, everyone 100% believed what Pope Gregory said. And they were like, whoa. You're saying that black cats are in league with the devil? Well, since you're saying that, I'm down, and we need to get rid of this black cat from our house. And all the followers of Catholicism at the time, and what you need to remember is kind of Catholicism became very popular during the Middle Ages or medieval times. Just even if we think about on the minute scales of just the fact of them having so much power, having so much wealth, they had also the level of education that was quite rare for the everyday person around the Middle Ages or medieval times. They were involved in the communities, because where there wasn't any charities per se, the church would give to people that were in need. So they were, in sense, like the charity. They were the focal point in people's lives. This was the main thing that you had. You had, I guess, state and the church, and it's still kind of on that same plane nowadays, while we're, I guess, living in this modern era. We're technologically different from the medieval times, but not a lot of things that they stood for, but the foundations of the constructs of what they set up still exist today. So I think that's quite interesting. But anyway, 100 years after Pope Gregory makes his right, and people immediately go out there for 100 years killing cats because they need to get rid of the devil, because cats, especially black cats, are in league with Lucifer, and that can't fly with the God-fearing Catholic people of the medieval times. And when the Black Death hits Europe and it wipes out a lot of the population at the time, the idea that the death, there being a lower level of cats, would affect anything to do with how the plague hit is kind of bizarre. Only in the sense of, we now know through, I guess, modern science that the plague was a disease caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, and it was initially transmitted by fleas. I was going to say bees, but no, transmitted through or by fleas, which passed it to their hosts. So the potential infection or the potential hosts of being infected by these disease-ridden fleas included rodents, which would be like mice, rats, which was one of the main carriers of the plague. But then also humans were infected by fleas, which is why so many humans died. Dogs and cats were also included in this list. So it's an interesting inquiry to think that what the Pope said incited so many deaths of cats, which then snowballed into that causing the snow death, the Black Death. But then at the same time, you need to think that although the Black Death hit Europe very hard, it also, before it came and affected the Europeans, it also affected people in Asia and people in Egypt as well as that. And for those that aren't aware, cats originally come from Asia, and they were worshipped in Egypt. And if the Black Death was transmitted through the fleas, and the fleas also infected the rodents as well as the cats, that would suggest that cats were dying because of the plague as well as humans. So, I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't there. I wasn't alive in the 1230s. But I can just talk about my intrigue about what happened around that time. So and see kind of the possible connections between where these ideas and myths in the history might have come from. But this interesting event or myth that has circulated around through history, I think it was interesting diving down that rabbit hole, because originally when I saw the fact about history, I was like, whoa, no, a pope incited death on cats? Nah, that can't be true. Let me find out more about it. And as I delve in deeper into the subject, I was just like, whoa, there's so many layers to peel back about what happened or what could have possibly happened. But that is where I'm going to leave my inquest. But don't let that be the end of your inquest. If you're interested more about this topic, or you found it of any intrigue, look more into it, because there's so many other levels that I haven't mentioned that you could find out more about. Or maybe I haven't explained it in the best way, but you might find better understanding from looking at the references that I will drop in the show notes for this episode. But anyway, I promised you the answer to a question at the start of this show, which I posed in a really weird way, if I think about it, in the sense that I posed it in the sense of what makes you happy, and as if I can give you the answer to all the things that you need. And that's not what I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you just some science. So I was watching, what was I watching? A YouTuber by the name 42, which it's spelled 40, like fort, and then a Y, and then 2, which I thought is a genius name. And I was watching one of his videos, and he mentioned about how smiling actually makes you happy, because I can't remember what the episode that on his channel that I was watching and what it was about, but he mentioned this thing, and I was just like, what? So I can make myself happy just by smiling? And yeah, it sounds kind of bizarre, but it's actually true. So basically, when you smile, your brain releases tiny molecules called neuropediates. I think I might have said that wrong, but anyway. And these neuropediates are used to help fight off stress. Then other neurotransmitters like dopamines and serotonin and endorphins come into play. The endorphins act as though they're kind of like a mild pain reliever, whereas the serotonin acts as an antidepressant, which is kind of an interesting thought process, in the sense of there's a study that has suggested that smiling can help us recover faster from stress, or when our heart rate is risen. So it could be interesting to trial, maybe even fake smiling, even like smile when you don't feel like smiling, just so you can get that rush of endorphins and serotonin and dopamines, and trick your brain into thinking that you're happy, which in turn will actually make you happy. So, I mean, it's a weird kind of paradox to think about it, that you could, in some way, boost your own mood without the need of anything. So, I don't know, there's times when you might feel down and there may be, I don't know, a song or a TV show or a creator on YouTube or TikTok or whatever your fix is, and you'll go on there and you'll watch them and it'll boost your mood and it'll make you happier or put that pep in your step. But there's an interesting thought process. It's not thought process. It's for, I can't think of the thought experiment. That's what I was looking for. It's an interesting thought experiment that you should definitely try and put into motion whenever you're stressed or feeling not so happy. Smile and see if even if it feels like you're being fake on what you're actually feeling, that fake smile could actually make you happy. So, what makes you happy? Smiling makes you happy. So if you're ever feeling down, smile. Even if you're not smiling for any particular reason, just smile. Fake smile, real smile, just smile, man. Smiling scientifically makes you happy. So I will leave it there. I will call that the end of the show. So I hope that you have enjoyed episode 16 of the More You Know Mondays. I hope that you've learned at least something from this episode of the show. I hope that you've actually got this far into the episode, and yeah, thank you for listening. I've got more next week. As always, I won't be mentioning what I will be talking about next week, but if this is maybe in the future and episode 17 is already out, then you already know what's coming next. But hey man, this is future talk. This would be crazy, like if someone in the future is listening to this when episode 17 is out and they're just like, whoa man, how did he know? How did he know that I knew? Because I'm thinking about the future. Hey man, wait. Anyway, but yeah, I'm glad that you got this far into the show if you enjoyed the episode, and I'll catch you next week. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.